Okay, so hello everybody. My name is Megan Dotson and I'm the program manager for the Mental Health TTC at the National American Indian and Alaska Native Center. I wanted to welcome you to Trauma Informed Therapy Part 2. Avis Garcia will be presenting today, and we're doing this as a series, so there is actually 5 parts to this series. We are part of the National American and Alaska Native Mental Health Technology Center, and it's located in the University of Iowa. It's part of the National MHTTC network. This project is supported by SAMHSA. The content is developed by the presenter, and the opinions expressed do not necessarily reflect the views or policies of SAMHSA, HHS, or the American Indian and Alaska Native MHTTC. Following today's event, we will send out a follow-up email, which will include links to the presentation slides and recording, information about how to request and receive CEUs, and a link to our evaluation survey or GIPRA. At the end of today's event, we will also share the link to our evaluation survey in the chat box. And this survey is really important for our center and our funders to ensure that our events are beneficial to those that attend. So your participation is voluntary. We would really appreciate you taking a few minutes to help us by completing this survey. You can skip any questions you don't want to answer, and all responses will be kept confidential and cannot be linked to you. So please reach out to myself or any of our staff if you have questions about these surveys. We did want to take a minute here to talk about land acknowledgements. So although we are gathered virtually today, we want to take the time to acknowledge the land and pay respect to the indigenous nations whose homelands were forcibly taken and inhabited. Please take a moment to read this land acknowledgement, which was created by 2 members of our team, Ella and Keely Driscoll. And this will be included in your handouts as well. So with that, I wanted to introduce today's speaker, Avis Garcia, and she can tell us a little bit about herself. Avis, welcome, and thank you again for taking the time to present today.
Thank you.
And you can share your screen when you're ready then.
Okay. Second here. Okay. How am I doing?
We can see it.
Okay.
Looks good.
Okay. As long as I don't touch anything. One time I
Right.
lost everybody. And I proceeded for the whole duration, thinking I had an audience. Well, good morning or good afternoon, everyone. My name is Avis Garcia, and I am from the Wind River Reservation here in Wyoming. I am a member of the Northern Arapaho tribe, and my father was Eastern Shoshone. So those of us that are both tribes from our reservation often refer to ourselves as show raps. And I have been a licensed addictions counselor and a professional counselor for 2 decades now. It's kind of hard for me to believe that, but that's how I've been able to acquire so much knowledge and experience over the years from all of the work that I've done. In 2017, I earned my PhD in counselor education and supervision from the University of Wyoming. Prior to that, I earned my master's degree in 2001 from the same University of Wyoming. And I earned my bachelor's in 96 from the University of Wyoming. Of course, I went there because it's close to home for me, because we all tend to stay close to home, or most of the people I know that have gone to college stay close so that they can often go back, or the families can come and visit. And I'm also a certified trauma professional. And I came across trauma work through my working with the addictions population for several years. And early on, I realized that a lot of substance abuse was related to a lot of trauma. So I am working on this series here, and this session will cover some interventions. And I always try to include some self-care because this work can be very draining. And it's important to take care of ourselves while we help other people. And so I will go on ahead and get started with this presentation. And if you have any questions or comments, we'll save those for the end. But I do have a couple of polling questions. So if you want to respond, please feel free to put those into the comments. And I will go on ahead and get started. Okay. Why it's not. Okay. Today's objectives are to provide you comprehensive understanding of core skills to help you work with trauma. This session will identify and explore skills to help you work with trauma and share with you all that I know about trauma treatment. Like I said, this is a 5-part series. And one of these series was a special request. The 4th one will cover human trafficking in Indian country, and that was upon special request. So I'm always open to requests from participants. So if there's something you want to hear later, please let me know that as well. So today we'll discover what trauma is, its impact, cover some data, cover some core principles of trauma-informed care, practicing trauma-informed care. Again, look at the impact of trauma work and focus on self-care for ourselves that help people who struggle with trauma, and also the importance of helping our clients to utilize their strengths and increase their resilience to help themselves heal and recover from trauma that they've experienced. Trauma-informed care. What do we mean by that? How does this affect people? What can we learn from listening to the voices of people who have experienced trauma? Why is understanding trauma important in the work that we do? What can we do to ensure, sorry, I just now see a typo, that we can help those we serve who have experienced trauma? And the stresses of our own work and lives may also make trauma a personal concern. The first question I have was in regards to organizations. I'd like to know if your organization has been working on becoming more trauma informed. And the responses are: A, has not considered it at all; B, considered it over the last year; and C, your agency has been making concerted efforts to become more trauma informed by providing training to people that need it to help the agency provide that service. What is trauma and why is it important? Why is it important? Like I shared with you all, I learned in my work with substance abuse and other addictions that my first real job out of my master's degree program was at a residential treatment program. And what I noticed was when people completed their residential treatment program, they waited until the very, probably almost the last week of their treatment to drop some very traumatic information about themselves. And from that time on, I became curious as to how we can help these people earlier and not wait until they're at the end of their treatment, because that just tells me that they didn't even work on that trauma yet. And for some people, it can take a long time to address those trauma issues that they've been dealing with all their life. And a lot of people turn to substance use as a way to help themselves cope because they don't know other ways to get through it.
And Avis, in answer to your question, a lot of people put C and some B, no A's and 1 D.
Okay, that's good. That's good. It is pretty a hot topic now in the counseling profession. So I've been seeing a lot of other webinars popping up. So I've been jumping on those when I have the time to. So I'm glad you guys are here today and that your agencies are really helping to be more trauma informed so that we can help the people as they need it. Trauma can occur at any age or development, and it often occurs outside of expected life stages are perceived as traumatic. This can be a child's death before a parent, cancer as a teenager, a personal illness, a job loss before retirement, and a lot of people have lost their jobs. I think a lot of this COVID has been traumatic for a lot of people and a lot of kids as well. It's been something that we've all experienced, I think, throughout the world as a traumatic event. Individuals may experience the event directly. We may witness an event. We might feel threatened or hear about an event that affects someone they know. You know, lots of times the news tends to show the most traumatic events in people's lives, and sometimes it's a bit much for me, even usually when it involves children. It's not just the event itself that determines whether something is traumatic, but also the individual's experience of the event. So not everyone experiences trauma the same. Everyone experiences it differently, and their treatment interventions also need to be different. Just like we do substance abuse treatment, we don't cookie cutter our treatment plans. We try to individualize them to meet that specific individual's needs when it comes to trauma. Okay. See, maybe this will work. Sorry. And what do we mean by trauma? It refers to intense and overwhelming experiences that involves serious loss, threat, or harm to a person's physical or emotional well-being. These experiences may occur at any time in a person's life. They may involve a single traumatic event or be repeated over many years. These trauma experiences can be overwhelming and can overwhelm the person's coping resources as well. This often leads to a person to find a way that coping that may work in the short run but can cause serious harm in the long run, such as using substances. Traumatic life experiences can be physical, emotional, and/or sexual abuse in childhood or adulthood. In childhood, it could involve neglect or abandonment, food insufficiency, lack of money to meet basic needs. I've encountered families that they don't have any electricity in the home, and they're still living in there with candles. And that has to be hard for kids to go to school and know that, they're living a more difficult life than others. And being homeless, a lot of homelessness, death of a parent, divorce can be traumatic to children as well. Family life that includes drug addiction, alcoholism, parental incarceration, or violence. Can involve rape, can be a serious medical illness or disease that involves disabling conditions. Someone may lose their hearing or their vision or their ability to walk. Loss of function that is invasive and distressing procedures. I have a young niece who was recently thrown from her horse, and her parents are very concerned about her hearing, and she can't hear very well right now. So I know it has to be traumatic for the family back home. Other traumatic life experiences where a lot of PTSD and trauma work originated was with combat veterans and civil unrest conditions, including torture affecting soldiers and refugee civilians, catastrophic losses of one's home, livelihood, people, pets due to flood or tornadoes, hurricanes, or other disasters of nature. Fires, and also involved in or witnessing horrific events involving violence, gruesome accidents, or death and serious injury. You know, we've had some of those school shootings that have been traumatic to all the people that work in the schools. And how might experiencing trauma in childhood affect a person? And I'm going to share with you some of the findings from the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, also known as the ACE study. And I often use this questionnaire in recovery. I'll take it and we'll make it the topic of a group sometimes, just to get people to open up and look at the fact that they may need some help with trauma. Another question I have is your agency or organization routinely tracking ACEs? Yes, no, or not certain. Do you routinely screen for trauma throughout your agency? Yes, no, or not certain. And if a person screens positive for trauma, does your agency provide more extensive assessment? Yes, no, or not certain. It's very important that we do this now so that we can catch these people early and get them the help that they need a lot sooner. And what was the study? The study was from the Center of Disease Control and Kaiser Permanente, a health management organization collaboration. It was a 10-year study involving 17,000 people that looked at the effects of adverse childhood experiences, also known as trauma, over the lifespan. This was one of the largest studies ever done on this subject. People enrolled in the health plan were asked 10 questions related to ACEs that covered physical and emotional and/or sexual abuse, neglect and abandonment, divorce, alcoholism or drug addiction in the family violence, poverty, homelessness, lack of food, basic needs, a family member in prison, or a family member with a mental illness. And when I do run groups with my clients, I do share with them that I could probably check every one of these, and that I have the lived experience of having been through a lot of trauma throughout my life. But it's taken me several years to be able to get to the point where I can help other people and talk about it. Of the 17,000 people who answered the questions, 80% were white, 50% were men, including 50% women and Hispanic. 74% had attended college, 10% were Asian, and 62% were over the age of 50. And as you look at this number here, I also see that none of this included any Native Americans in this study. But like I said, from my own personal experience and other counselors that I know that serve Native people, they often bring up the fact that some of our people are really struggling with a lot of trauma in their life. What they found from the 17,000 people was 1 in 4 were exposed to 2 categories. 1 in 16 were exposed to 4 categories. 22% were sexually abused as children. 66% of the women experienced abuse, violence, or family strife in childhood. Women were 50% more likely than men to have experienced 5 or more adverse childhood experiences. The impact of trauma over the lifespan are neurological, biological, psychological, and social in nature. Changes in brain neurobiology, social, emotional, and cognitive impairment. So when people are in trauma, their brains don't work very well. They can't make decisions or think clearly. Adopting of health risk behaviors as coping mechanisms, such as eating disorders, smoking, substance abuse, self-harming, sexual promiscuity, violence, and severe and persistent behavioral health and social problems, and early death. Multiple trauma experiences raise the risk for anxiety problems and fear. People may avoid people, places, and things that are similar to the reminders of the traumatic event. They can have physical health problems. And I've also learned that a lot of my clients that are in treatment are more likely to report physical health problems, having a lot of pain, versus they're having some trauma. Sleep problems, emotional problems such as feeling numb and are disconnected from their self or the environment, memory problems, and flashbacks. Multiple trauma experiences raises the risk for alcoholism and alcohol abuse, substance use and abuse, obesity, respiratory difficulties, heart disease, multiple sexual partners, poor relationships, smoking, suicide attempts, and also unintended pregnancies. Trauma experienced in adulthood, some examples are combat-related trauma, refugee, torture, civil unrest, witnessing or experiencing violence, catastrophic loss and natural disasters, and terrorism. The bottom line is these experiences raises the risk for severe emotional distress and suicide, physical illness, substance abuse, and a host of other life difficulties. And excuse the typos, I just see these as I'm going through here, and I went through this earlier. Trauma can lead to PTSD. The following symptoms are clear indications that the person has been overwhelmed by trauma, experiencing serious mental health consequences, such as reliving that experience, avoidance and emotional numbing, oversensitivity and irritability from post-traumatic stress symptoms. And then when we talk about what reliving trauma means, they may be having intrusive memories or images or perceptions that can occur later in life. Some people, it can be years later in their life. They may be having nightmares, having some bad daydreams or flashbacks, exaggerated emotional and physical reactions, dissociative experiences, and that's feeling disconnected from their body and their environment. And for many, this is a way of coping with that, which is the avoidance and the numbing. The avoidance and numbing set of symptoms includes detachment from people, places, and things, and that's just their way of trying to keep themselves safe. Efforts to avoid thoughts, feelings, activities, or situations associated with that trauma. Maybe they don't want to go shopping because maybe they were robbed, or being in a bad car accident at a certain place. Inability to have positive and loving feelings. They just don't have a lot of trust, limited emotions, loss of interest, and avoidance of activity. They may have oversensitivity and irritability, which includes an exaggerated startle response. I've seen some people, loud noises can be startling to them and can trigger some of their PTSD symptoms. They may be on guard much of the time, have insomnia and other sleep disturbances, can't concentrate, and have anger outbursts. More findings about trauma. 1 in 6 men have experienced emotional trauma. 80% of people in psychiatric hospitals have experienced physical or sexual abuse. That's pretty high. 66% of people in substance abuse treatment report childhood abuse or neglect. 90% of women with alcoholism were sexually abused or suffer severe violence from their parents. More findings, 2/3, 67% of these individuals make suicide attempts. 64% have suicide attempts as adults. 80% of children and adolescents have suicide attempts. These are all attributable to the adverse childhood experiences, and women are 3 times as likely as men to attempt suicide over the lifespan. 92% of incarcerated girls reported sexual, physical, or emotional abuse. And I work with a lot of women that get right out of treatment. My treatment program, where I am the executive director, I often see a lot of these women, and they're very open in talking about what they've been through. But I agree with that. Most of these women do share that they've been through a lot of abuse and trauma in their life. Boys who experience or witness violence are 100 times, 1,000 times more likely to commit violence than those who don't. And as many as 1/3 of the women and 14% of men are survivors of childhood sexual abuse. What the data tells us is that a majority of adults and children in psychiatric treatment settings have significant trauma histories. A sizable percentage of people with substance use disorders have traumatic symptoms that interferes with their achieving or maintaining sobriety. And a sizable percentage of adults and children in prison or juvenile justice systems have trauma histories. The bottom line is trauma in childhood and adulthood matters. A quality health care, human services, and our social safety net organization is designed to address the impact of trauma for every single person that is served in that organization. It is difficult to determine if a person's problem is trauma related. We don't know what kinds of experiences our clients have had when they seek our help, so we need to approach them in a universally sensitive manner. If we assume that their issues are not related to trauma, we miss that opportunity to help. If we assume trauma is involved, we can pay attention to the signs of trauma and ask the right questions and get them the right help. Trauma-informed interventions. The first thing you always want to do is provide a safe environment. They need to feel safe. Emotional, cognitive, and physical and interpersonal. We need to be trustworthy and transparent in what we're doing. We need to include peer support and mutual self-help. I often encourage them to make a friend while they're in treatment. And we have peer recovery specialists now, and they've been really helpful. Once you get to know them and their traumatic life experience, they're able to be supportive help to them. And collaboration and mutuality. We don't just tell them we're going to do something to them. We need to share that power and that decision making and recognition that everyone has a role to play in that person's recovery. Interventions include, we need to empower them, give them voice and choice. Strengths are built on and validated, and new skills developed as needed. We need to believe in their resilience as individuals, our organizations, and our communities, building on what clients, staff, and communities have to offer rather than perceived deficits. Cultural, historical, and gender issues leverages the healing value of cultural connections and recognizes and addresses historical trauma. The 3 E's of trauma. The first one is events. Objective, what happened? For example, a car crash. The second E is the experiences, how the person experienced the event based upon their developmental age, prior history, available resources, environmental effects, and get their basic needs met. For example, someone's fire burns their house down, they're going to need clothes and shelter. The third E of trauma is the effects. How is this affecting them emotionally, mentally, physically, and socially? The 4 Rs is the realization of the event, recognize the experience and the effects, respond to help people live a high quality of life, and we need to resist re-traumatization. We don't want to tell them to suck it up and pull themselves up by the bootstraps. As professionals, we need to ensure that we do no harm. Intention of intervention summary is to create safety and develop trust through the use of cultural resources, peer support, transparency, collaboration, and empowerment to explore events, experiences, and their environment, respond in a way to help people live a rich and meaningful life without re-traumatizing them. And the main thing is always creating safety. We want to have a nurturing voice, help them to develop a crisis plan and a post-crisis plan, and be mindful of activities and an awareness of self, have grounding techniques, awareness of the present, unhooking, and looking at the Pandora's box. One of these on the Pandora's box is in working with someone who isn't coping with trauma issues, we might talk about what that Pandora's box looks like to them, what is in that box, and to help them mentally. My lady that runs our women's treatment group actually has these little boxes that she bought from the craft store, and they can paint it and decorate it however they want, but they learn to use it as like a safety or a grounding technique so that they can keep that box closed and they can open it when they want at their own will. And also creating boundaries. Some people have physical boundaries. They don't like anybody to get too close to them, especially females. They may have issues with men, which is why our program is probably one of the few that has a women's specific group. And they may have some emotional boundaries and some cognitive boundaries as well. Transparency. We need to always explain the rationale behind what we're going to do so that they feel safe. We need to encourage open communication, which will help garner support, not assuming that can make us feel safe and feel like we're in danger. Encourage them to stop mind reading and to use open communication. Think about times when they thought that they were reading people's minds and it had a negative impact, such as asking them, how do you know that? And practice using I statements to identify what they need. And to develop an awareness of the motivations, thoughts, feelings, and urges. We need to have collaboration and empowerment with our patients, such as using multisensory guided imagery, doing a values identification, living in the and. How are you different now after this event? How has it changed your life? The values identification, one activity that we've done is we let them come up with a whole list of values and then taking sheets of paper and sticking them on the wall. We have like these big Post-it stickies that go on the wall, and they can identify ways that they cope with those certain things in their life. And then we summarize that all into a handout that they can take home. Help them identify and enhance their strengths for coping with irritability, hypervigilance, sleep disturbances, flashbacks, numbing, and withdrawal. Collaboration and empowerment includes create meaning, what does this experience mean to them? Maybe playing it out. Trigger identification and modification. So helping them to identify certain things that triggers them to feel hypervigilant or afraid, and helping them come up with other ways that they can cope with those triggers that causes them some discomfort and stress. And use of red flags and green flags, such as maybe they can look at the red flags as those are the triggers, and to change those red flags into green flags so that they can easily resort to coping mechanisms that they can learn in counseling. And systematic desensitization. And we want to do this when they're ready. We don't want to do anything when they're not ready. It's always good to check with them of how are we doing? How are you doing? Do you want to go on? Or is this a good spot where, we're ready to stop and come back to this later, and not forcing them to do anything that they're not ready to do. Narrative therapy. Their story can be written or charted. Not everyone does this. Like I said, everybody needs different techniques to help themselves start to heal. And maybe some people don't want to write it down because they're not comfortable with it. Some may. So if not, we can chart it. You can do a timeline and maybe cover those events in their life of what was going on and what happened. And then one that I thought was interesting was a broken pot. And this was taking a terracotta pot and breaking it and taking the big pieces and having that individual write those trauma symptoms on each piece. And then when they're done with that, you can discuss those symptoms, and then we can take some glue, give them some glue, and let's put this back together of how you can heal that person. Some people, like I said, they might want to avoid super crowded places and not go shopping at certain times. There's a certain time, and there is a certain time to avoid things. Being in a car wreck. Maybe they couldn't avoid riding in a car and they realized that it was scary. I've been through a car wreck when I was really, really young. And I remember it took me a while to feel safe to get in a car. Encourage their awareness of the triggers and have a plan in place to cope with those. And ask them what they could do differently. How do they need people close to you to behave that day? And that's when you get the family involved, and so that they're able to know that you don't want to leave them alone, and maybe they might have some nightmares, so you might want to get up with them and sit with them until they feel like they're ready to go to sleep. And like I said, some people want to write, and I watch a lot of Netflix series, and so we might say this is the movie of your life. This is the series, and what would the next chapter be like? How could that be different? And what do you want it to be about? So that they can make meaning out of what happened. Some cultural and peer resources involves faith healers and pastors and colleagues. And for those of us that are Native, we have our elders and we have our healers in our communities as well. When I am at home, I try to include a lot of our cultural ways into our treatment programming. I combine it with a lot of work that I do, and those that I work with back home, I encourage that as well. And I tell, even though I've lived through a lot of personal trauma in my own lifetime, I maybe went to counseling once and it was not a good experience for me. I remember they gave me some pills that just made me sleep, and I got tired of sleeping, and I finally just decided to get up one day and wake up. But what helped me the most was all of the cultural practices that my grandparents provided for me. And I have a grandfather who took me to Native American church meetings, and I started going to Sweat Lodge, and I've been in our Sundance probably every time I've had a major trauma in my life. But you need to have support, and the biggest thing for me has been that. And like I said, some people have a lot of resiliency, and I like to say that I'm probably one of those people who has a lot of resilience, but I've also done a lot of reading and learning about all of these issues, that I've probably also done a lot of self-help for myself. It's also good to identify peer resources in specialty groups that you can refer people to. And it's really important to get the family involved, or whatever supports they have around them, so that they're not alone. But we always have to be mindful that sometimes the family is the trigger. So we have to make sure that we explore that issue. If they're telling you they don't want to get their family involved, you might want to ask why. Other people that have trauma are firefighters, cops. My dad was a police officer for many years on the reservation, and he was also a Vietnam veteran. And one of his things was he did not like Chinese food. And I realized that that was a trigger for him, was just the smell. So that was something he didn't like to do. And having people that use those terms and phrases that are meaningful. So, if you know of other cops or other firefighters, even medical doctors deal with trauma every day. They're in charge of people's lives in emergency rooms. And so they see a lot of traumatic stuff. And although I haven't done much work with them, I do have a friend who used to be a police officer right out of college, and she had to quit because she saw something very traumatic in the jail that she had a hard time dealing with. And we need to be able to respond without re-traumatizing our patients. We need to build their resiliency and prevention vulnerabilities by having challenging questions, facts for and against, emotional or factual reasoning. Is there a high or low probability that your belief is or will be true? So a lot of what happens to them really has a lot of effect on just how they think about life in general. What else contributed to that situation? Are you catastrophizing? Sorry, I can't say that word. Catastrophizing or using all or nothing thinking. So they may be thinking the worst thing of certain situations that may not be factual. So when we talk about presenting resiliency and demoting re-traumatization, we might want to ask them when going into a situation and how they felt triggered thinking it's going to be a dangerous situation. What are the facts or beliefs that this could be a dangerous situation? So they may be, like I said, they may be afraid to go shopping or afraid to go running alone. They could say, this reminds me of a time when I got my purse stolen from me. And that's emotional reasoning, asking them if the situation they're going to go to will be a dangerous situation. What else contributed to the situation in the past? So getting them to see that what happened in the past is not the same in the present. A lot of the time, there's factors that are not present in the present situation. There's no evidence, the situation in the present. So letting them know there's no evidence that that same situation is going to happen now. And what are the facts for or against their belief about that situation? Are you expecting the worst? Asking themselves questions to feel more empowered and ground themselves. EMDR is priceless, but I've also learned that it doesn't work for everyone. Once they engage in EMDR, those that it works for, they have to continue with completing that, because it is a process and it is also draining. I signed up for EMDR training, and that's right when the COVID hit, and I had to get a refund of my registration fees. And now they are offering it online, but some of the people I know who actually got the training live said they will really recommend it. If I can get this training in person, it would be better than trying to do it online. I have heard mixed responses, and it can be an option. So letting them know what options are available for them that you can refer them to, because not everybody is skilled to address this problem. A summary of the trauma-informed care interventions: create safety, develop trust through the use of cultural resources, peer support, be transparent in what you're going to do, having collaboration, and to empower these individuals. We need to believe that they have the ability to bounce back. Ask yourself if any intervention could be disempowering, and be non-transparent, or could something be triggering them in any way? Like I said, everyone's trauma is different. Inform clients before the intervention of the potential benefits and effects. I need to remind them of the risks involved. And, especially when we're gonna maybe hold hands or light candles or turn off the lights, or asking them to close their eyes because they might feel that their space is being invaded. So we need to let them know why we're gonna do something. And such as, telling them, I'm gonna ask you to close your eyes because it's gonna help you to visualize. Or I'm gonna ask you to take some slow, deep breaths so that you can rest and digest and train your brain to relax. And also allowing them the conscious choice to participate in whatever intervention it is. So if there's something they really don't want to do, we can't force them. And last but not least, I like to remind everyone that this work can be draining, and you need to have a good supervisor, or a good debriefing team, or a good colleague at work that you can go to. A lot of people seem to think self-care involves going to a spa or going on a vacation. And although that would be nice if that's what it was, I really see self-care as a conscious, active role in preserving our own well-being. And like, we can't take care of other people if we're not well ourselves. A lot of us do it in the wrong way. We work ourselves to the ground, and then we'll use self-care as a way to undo that. So you need to be mindful of that. Sometimes I tell my staff, I think it's time for you to use some of your vacation time and take a break from it all. You need to find your niche. That is working with the people that you enjoy working with, and not work in an environment where you're not happy working there. Set firm boundaries. For example, you may not end your sessions on time. It's very important to set that timer and end your sessions on time. Too much email. You don't want to be checking your email all day long. It can be really distracting. And sometimes we work harder than our clients do. And when I realize that, I'm like, wait a minute, I shouldn't be working this hard. I need to get this turned around to where the client takes the reins. We also need to have a good sense of what boundaries we need to set for ourselves. I have to tell people when I have important work to do, I'm here, but I'm not here. Don't distract me unless it's a major emergency. So we have to do that sometimes for our own well-being. And charge your worth, which validates the value of your work. I know a lot of services on the reservation are provided for free, and out here where I'm working off the reservation, we charge for our services, although we are a nonprofit agency. But it's important to make sure you're making what you feel you deserve. Find support for yourself. Our work can be isolating. We need to have consultation groups, have family and friend support from loved ones. And a lot of times they can identify it before we can. And just like I said, I can tell when my staff needs to take a break. And it's my job to be able to fill in for people when they need that time off. Having a work-life balance, I'm always busy with work or with the people that I love. I have kids and I have grandkids. So we have to be able to manage it all. And sometimes we can be overwhelmed with our work, and that can be a serious problem that can cause us to have burnout. Burnout makes us less productive. Feeling bad compromises your immune system, making you more vulnerable to health problems. We need to know how to prevent burnout, which begins by taking good care of ourselves. I don't mean a treat yourself day, that's only temporary. Sometimes we do need to take a mental health day and use some of that sick leave that we have just to reset our own selves. Real self-care has to be a sustainable habit that builds strength you need to help you deal with the stressors coming your way. So this needs to be something that you do ongoing, kind of like a ritual, a routine of, how you start and end your day. Go to bed early. Sleep restores your brain and helps you flush out toxins. It's not getting good sleep is like not flushing the toilet after using it. And I know that sounds gross, but that's how you want to think about getting a good night's sleep. If you're sleep deprived, it's going to make it hard for you to focus, learn, and deal with your emotions on the next day. One of the other things I found helpful is creating a bedtime ritual. I spend a lot of time on YouTube and Pinterest as entertainment for myself. So maybe you want to get yourself ready for bed. Essential oils is something I've also started doing this past year. Lavender, having some relaxing music. YouTube is full of lots of relaxing music to help you go to sleep. Turning your lights down. Another thing that's good is to eat a good breakfast. I remember when my grandma was taking care of me, she would always tell us that we needed to eat because it was for our brain. And she was right. Your brain is craving a fresh supply of glucose. So you need to eat a good meal of whole grains and proteins because a good breakfast is what's going to help you learn and remember. Limit the digital distractions. Only check email, social media, and news during specific chunks of time. Morning, afternoon, and evening are real distractions, which can make it hard to get any work done. Usually on Monday morning, I shut social media off completely. I don't even look at that until the weekend. It's kind of my little reward to myself for working all week. So I like to check it out and see what my kids and my family are doing back home. Noise on in the background can also stress you out. Turn on a do not disturb mode on your phone and close the unnecessary windows on your computer and get to work. Going for a walk. Halfway through your day, get outside and go for a walk, even if it's just for 5 minutes. It helps make it easier for me to get through the day. Psychologists have found that midday walks boost your mood and reduces stress. It gets your body active and gives your brain a chance to rest. And learn to say no. Asking me to do something I don't want to do. When I'm overwhelmed, I only add something new to my workload if I can get rid of something else. So if somebody needs me to do something, I see if there's something that I can get rid of at that time so that I don't feel like I have a lot of things to do. If I don't do that, I'll burn out. One of the ways I say no is using the DEAR assertiveness skill, which is the D is to describe the situation, letting them know, I have a lot of work to do and I know I would really like to go do a good job. So expressing how I feel, I'm overwhelmed right now. And what I really need to do is I really want to do a good job on this. So if you'll give me more time, I'd rather give you a good report if I have adequate time to do this job. So can I do this tomorrow? Because I want to make sure I'm doing it right, and I don't want you to get a rush job. And connect with your favorite people. At least once a day, connect with your peers at the office or in your personal life. We all need to have that social interaction. And be at home when you're home. Don't take your work home with you. It makes it hard for you to relax and unwind. One thing you might want to try is dumping all your thoughts and worries and all the things that I have to do on a Post-it or a notepad so that I can leave it there for tomorrow when I get back. Then I can review it in the morning. So this quote here says, trust yourself. You know more than you think you do. Some distress tolerance skills on my ride home. Sometimes I'm tired and stressed out. So I can tolerate by using distress tolerance skills. I can distract myself through music. Music can transport your mind to a better place and time. And connect with meaning. When I get home from work, I like to connect with the people who mean the most to me, even my dog. Connecting with things that give your life meaning can make it easier to deal with work that could make your life feel meaningless. And what's your self-care routine? How do you cope with burnout? Everybody has different ways that they deal with self-care and making sure that they don't burn out. You can put your comments in the comment section. And that wraps it up. Do we have any questions or comments?
So we do,
Okay.
Avis. I kept track of a couple of them.
Okay.
One person wanted you to explain a little bit more when you talked about living in the and.
Okay. Living in the end. That could be when they are talking about their trauma that they've experienced. So as they're talking about it, we can talk about and what happened and how are you coping with that, and how is that making you feel now, and what are some things you can do differently, just using the word and.
Okay, thank you. One other one was, why do you think people wait until they are about to leave inpatient to share deep traumas?
I really think for some of the people that I've heard their traumas are shame. I think they also, shame. I've read this shame and self-loathing, and I didn't get into that at all. But a lot of that is around sexual abuse and rape, and some people feel like it was their fault. And I never asked them that question of why they wait, and that's one of the reasons I like to look for that up front. When I get a new client, I like to go through their file and see what their assessment says, because we do have some questions that we ask that helps us to assess trauma. And I think catching it on the front end is really good. And at that treatment center that I was talking about, they started this years ago and they're still doing it. It's a workbook called Seeking Safety by Lisa Najavitz. And they were doing it with women at first, only to realize that, hey, we should do this with the men. So as far as I know, this residential treatment program is still doing the men's and women's seeking safety. And it teaches a lot of really good coping skills.
Thank you for explaining that a little bit further. And one last question. What are some good trauma screens or assessments that agencies are using?
Okay. The ACE is one, and it's a good, easy self-assessment form. And like I said, I take it into groups. And I'm trying to remember if the first session I had on trauma had a lot of screening tools attached to that. I can look that up. We use a mental health 3 form, and it also covers some trauma symptoms if they've had any experiences Let me see, sorry. Kind of losing the, trying to think.
One other thing I can mention while you're trying to find what you're looking for there, is some people have asked if you guys are gonna get a copy of the handouts, and the answer to that is yes. And then the ACEs thing that she's talking about is gonna be included with email that will come to everyone who's a registered participant today. So you'll have access to all these things that she's talking about when you get the email. And then the recording is available a couple days after we get done with this. It gets put up on our YouTube site. So one other question, Avis, is can you mention some stress tolerance techniques that you use?
Some stress tolerance techniques. One of my very favorites is going to the gym. I had knee surgery the end of December, so it's really limited my physical ability to do the things that I like to do. So I actually was able to go back this weekend, and I've been wanting to go home because the sweat lodge is been like my saving grace. It's the one thing that's kept me grounded. And not only do I go in there to help myself, I go in there to pray for the people that I'm working with and the people that I know are struggling because they need it. To me, that's one of the best things that I like to do. I practice my culture and my ways here in my home. I have a dog and spending time with my family. I like to read a lot. I guess I could say I'm addicted to reading. If you came to my house, you'd see I have books all over the place. I guess I find entertaining and reading to be something that helps me to distress if I read something very enjoyable.
One other question was asked here, and it says, is there a trauma assessment or tool specific to Native Americans out there?
There is not one specific to Native Americans. That is a really good question. Because this is a series let's see, the next session that I'm going to do is going to be on brain-based trauma interventions. And the fourth one is going to be on human trafficking in Indian country. And the final one, I'm really going to focus on trauma with Native Americans that is also going to include the intergenerational trauma. And I am trying
Thank you.
to get
Another question was, for those of us who are working remotely, like myself and others on here, do you have strategies that we could use in addition to what you've already mentioned, really? I mean, I can offer one suggestion, just knowing what I do is, making that time to, if you can get outside and look at nature, take in the fresh air at any point throughout the day, whether it's cold, raining, doesn't matter. Just taking a break and walking away from that computer and leaving your phone on your counter if you can, just to get up, stretch, walk around. And it's kind of like just a small mini mental health break always seems to help me, because I get what some of you are going through completely, working from home. It's been almost 1 year tomorrow that I got sent home, and it's been very challenging, especially when you have kids at home and other obligations. So that's just one little suggestion I have. And I'm not the expert, but this is just what I've done.
I am still looking. I know the last presentation I did, I attached a lot of that stuff.
Yeah, and I think some of the stuff I may even have with the self-care, honestly, that you and I have been working on recently, and some of the things you just found the other day, I could share that document that I made with folks, if anybody's interested. I just sent it to an agency and they thought it was great, so maybe it will be useful for you guys. One person wanted to ask if you could review the dear assertiveness real quick.
The dear assertiveness is to describe how you're feeling. Like I said, you might want to tell them, I'm really overwhelmed with a lot of work that I have to do right now. And let me get back to that page. Describe the situation is the D. You know, I have a lot of work to do right now, and I know you want that report by this afternoon, but E is expressing how you feel. I'm really overwhelmed right now with all of the work that I have to get done. So being able to assert what you need. So I would really like to have some more time and reinforce how it's going to help everyone is the R. So I would really like to do a good job on this report that you need, but I'm going to need more time to do that. So I want to give you a nice report. I don't want to give you something that I just rushed and didn't get a lot of thought to.
Totally understandable. We always try and do the best we can, right?
Yeah.
I think I will share that document with you guys because it actually has a lot of descriptors about what's coming in Ava's series here that she's allowed me to share. So for those of you who, you know, attend these every month, you'll get an idea of what's to come in the next 3 months. And then there's a bunch of links to things you can utilize for self-care and self-help strategies. So I will have Natasha send that in the follow-up email with all the other things that you guys can receive. Does that sound good? Well, I know you guys can't respond, but.
And I apologize, I don't have all of that stuff right now, but I do know something that I wanted to attach today and didn't get to. And it is,
No
and
problem.
I have it on my phone. I actually downloaded and it's a free resource from SAMHSA. And it is, I'm trying to remember, I believe it's a TAP 57.
Oh, tip 50,
57.
something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of good tip whatever number comes after it from SAMHSA I've seen.
It is tip 57,
Mhm.
and you can download it from SAMHSA for free. And it is a really, really good free book that talks about all the assessments that you would want to read, because SAMHSA does a lot of the research for us. And it is called Trauma Informed Care in Behavioral Health Services, and it is tip 57 from SAMHSA, and that is free. And it has a specific section on assessments.
Perfect. Thank you. I know there's, you know, we've done a lot of research on finding specific like mental health assessments for Native Americans, and there is just not anything out there. And that is our goal, is to someday have, you know, one that's tailored. And but we're always talking about it because people ask us and they're like, nope, there's nothing out there. And it's really, really unfortunate.
We need more people that are Native to enter the field and do more research. And almost every topic that I'm asked to present on, there are not hardly any research information or specific information. There are only a very few that are. Everything tends to be based on the European society. So if you're more familiar with your community and the way your culture affects things, you're able to review things, at least I do, and find a way to make them fit. You know, sometimes I'm jazzing up the slides or looking at different ways we can do stuff to make it more acceptable and for people that are, you know, more traditional Native people back home, because, you know, they might say evidence-based methods, but they don't often apply to us or include us when they come up with the fact that it's evidence-based. And so a lot of times that's the first thing I look for, is like, how does this apply to people like myself, you know, and how am I going to help my own family? One book that I really suggest for those of you that help anyone with trauma, I actually got this book called 101 Trauma Informed Interventions, and I thought, I'm going to use this for my presentation. And It's not really what I was looking for, but it has a lot of activities that you can do with clients. And like I said, sometimes I take these to, especially the women's group. They like this kind of stuff. But the one I really liked is this trauma treatment toolbox. And it has a lot of really good information that's really helpful to work with people. And it does have some brain changing information in there. And then this is like the book of all books. It's called Trauma Counseling by Lisa Lopez Levers. I mean, it has like, you could teach a whole course in trauma with this book. So like I said, I do a lot of research for all of these presentations that I do. And there are a lot of self-care things. Like I said, Pinterest and YouTube. I think that's what I sent you guys yesterday. I was like, there's tons on here. I have Pinterest and I have all these categories because I do all kinds of counseling. You know, I do couples counseling. I might do like some of the self-care, anger management, CBT. So you can find a lot of stuff on there. And like I said, EMDR is one way to help people that doesn't work for everyone. I really don't know about the effectiveness of its use with Native Americans, but I have a few friends back home who were certified a couple of years ago. So I think that's something I'll have to talk with them about. But like I said, if you guys have something in particular you want to hear about, let me know. I'm always willing to do specific presentations for special requests.
Yeah, if anybody has something they need, you can contact our center, you can contact me, and then I can directly communicate with Avis. So she's a really hard worker, I can tell you that. Every time I've asked her to look into a topic, she does, and I know she likes to read and is good at research. So I appreciate, Avis, everything that you have provided today, and we will get all of this sent out in an email. Like I said, the video will be available in a couple days on our YouTube page, and she's already shared her slides with us. So we'll get that and the ACEs and the self-care document out to you guys. And we really appreciate the time you took to spend with us today. Avis, thank you again so much. And we look forward to our next series training will be, gosh, already in April. So that's the second Wednesday of the month in April, which is, if I look at my calendar right, it will be April 14th at noon Central Time. So we usually try to stick to an hour, but we've allowed an hour and a half, 90-minute time frame, just in case we have questions like this that come up at the end. And so you've had enough time on your calendar to participate and then stay till the end if you do have specifics for Avis. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Avis, thank you again. And we'll talk to you guys soon in April. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.